You know, this meeting is going to be recorded, so we're going to go ahead and start that right now. If you haven't already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We have tons of people. I'm seeing Wendy from Oregon. Hi, I'd like to see some other Pacific Northwest representation. I'm in Seattle myself, but we're about to get started. Today's webinar is all about the UN's World Water Day, which is all about bringing recognition to the billions of people worldwide who don't have access to safe drinking water. And we're going to be celebrating the wonderful building block of life that is water. I'll go ahead and start with some introductions. My name is Dylan Connolly. My pronouns are here, they. I am from the Space Science Institute, the National Center for Interactive Learning. My email is up on here, and my co-facilitator is Claire Ratcliffe-Adams, also from the Space Science Institute. And we're also joined by Beatrice Chavez, who's in the chat, providing chat support. She's going to be throwing the link to our link bank, which she already has, and she's going to be doing that periodically throughout our webinar today. All of the resources we're going to be discussing today are all linked on there, along with some really, really cool other stuff that we'll be talking about in this webinar. And it looks like, Claire, it looks like we've got a couple other people signing on to that Teams meeting if you want to go ahead and let them know where to really find us. Hello, Megan from Texas. Cool, so I figured we'd start with an icebreaker today. It's going to be a pretty simple icebreaker since it is a webinar status. We've got, the panelists and the attendees. I'm going to invite you to throw your answers in the chat. But since today is all about World Water Day and thinking about water conservation, ways water impacts different communities worldwide, I thought I would invite all of y'all to take some time and think about what are some water-related topics or concerns specific to you and your community. Like, for example, I think I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I'm from the Seattle area. We had an exceptionally dry summer this year, which meant not a lot of rainfall, not a lot of snowcap being built up. And so the land was really, really dried out. Soil was really, really dry. We had an exceptionally bad smoke season. We had weeks and weeks and weeks of wildfires here just a few weeks ago. I have never been in the about half a decade I've lived in the Seattle area, never been so glad for what we call the dark wet to start with the no sunshine and constant rain. We desperately needed some of that water. And so I think that goes to show, even in areas where water is considered, rainfall, fresh water can be considered something that's constant. Seattle's reputation is all about being a wet area. The lack of normal waterfall and rainfall can be hugely impactful to the environment. So please feel free to, what are some water related topics or concerns in your community? Go ahead and throw those in the chat if you feel so inclined. Claire, do you have any one that you would like to share out?
Yeah, I think just piggybacking off of your topic in the Pacific Northwest, here in the Front Range in Colorado, the Space Science Institute is located in Boulder. We had a big fire, the Marshall Fire, last January, which was really insane, that we're having wildfires all year round. It's no longer just one time of the year. And that really was because we had just really strange precipitation patterns. We had a lot of rain in the spring, and so we just got a ton of vegetation, and then just nothing through the end of the summer and the fall. And so we just had so much dried out vegetation that, an accident occurred and sparked a fire. And it was, again, and another weird thing was it wasn't a wildfire in the mountains, which is typical around here. It went all through suburban, the area between Boulder and Denver, which is suburban. So thousands of homes were burned. It was quite frightening. But yeah, I think, that we're talking about fire, but that goes hand in hand, with what's happening with climate change and with our precipitation patterns and the droughts that we go into.
Totally. I think that shows how important the water cycle is to all sorts of things, not just water as sustenance, but water as environmental impact, I think, is a really important thing. And I want to remind everyone, as you're entering your answers into the chat, be sure to switch in the chat box, switch from hosts and panelists to everyone, so everyone can see your answers. So Megan shared out that water conservation, especially during the summer, is really important to her. Tina said drought, wildfires affect both recreation, farming, agriculture, animal environments. I think that's a really good point. Recreation, I think, is a big one. If we lose, going on vacation, seeing new sites, I think is something that, especially in the Four Corners region and throughout the Southwest, those areas, like Lake Powell, for example, or, as those dry up, get less vacation-y, full of brine flies, that impacts local economies, tourism dependent economies. I think that's, all of these things are so related. Does anybody else have a water related concern, or even just a water story? Is there something interesting in your area or community related to water that you want to share out? Please feel free to put that in the chat. I'll give everyone another minute or so to do that before we move on. Yeah, I remember even hearing that the dry summer was affecting some of the salmon run out here, because as the creeks and rivers that salmon normally spawn upwards towards, some of those where the water levels were so low that the salmon, just operating on instincts, were like they were essentially beaching themselves on the creek side before they could spawn. So that's going to affect salmon populations and fisheries. Susan said we have a huge amount of lakes in our county, and they've been low for months. Also, with Indiana being a huge farming state, we've been desperately needing rain. Yeah, agriculture is a huge thing. When you rely on consistent rainfall and water tables to provide irrigation, a slight shift in that can really affect things. Christy said the availability of clean drinking water concerns me. Our water treatment plants churning out water that's unsafe to drink, even in places where there's good infrastructure, is a huge concern. Yeah, we're seeing more and more communities being affected by access to clean drinking water. Flint, Michigan has been without clean drinking water for a really long time. We've seen what's happened in Jackson as well. Like, just really water access to water is, it's not just something that's happening overseas. We have stories of that here domestically in the US. Tina said maybe off topic, but divide between those watering yards or golf courses and needing it for farms and families, problems like that in communities, absolutely. As the We Are Water project that's sponsoring this webinar is all about water in the Southwest and how that water gets divided up between agriculture, public use, native communities, and how who has access to the amounts and when is a huge issue. So water use, in addition to just how much water there is a really big issue. Well, thanks everybody for sharing those out. I think that's gotten us started, really, the gears in our heads turning, thinking about water conservation. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Claire to talk a little bit about the We Are Water project and what we're going to be here talking about today.
Great, thank you, Dylan. Yeah, as Dylan said, this webinar is sponsored by the We Are Water project, which is all about connecting communities and sharing stories and sharing place. So the We Are Water project focuses and works with public and tribal libraries in the Four Corners region. So that is the area where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona all come together, and it's just a really unique, beautiful part of our country. And it is an arid environment. So water can be critical. It is critical, and it is scarce in this region. And so We Are Water just wants to raise awareness about that and bring different communities together over this shared space. The libraries that we're working with serve Indigenous, Latinx, and rural communities. And so as we've been talking about, each community has different needs and uses for water, but it's important and vital for every single community to have access to clean, safe water. So yeah, this project, it's been going on since 2020, which was really interesting. That's when we started developing all of the learning resources and exhibit. And of course, the pandemic hit, and that really shed a whole nother light on equitable access to water. One of the exhibit is currently on tour at the Navajo Nation Library, and their community was hit so hard by the COVID pandemic, and not having a lot of access to safe water was very, very difficult. When we were being told to wash our hands all the time, and what do you do during a global health crisis when water might not be readily available? So that kind of shed some new light on this project. But the main heart of this project is connecting communities through conversations and explorations about water. and it has a multicultural traveling exhibit, which features Navajo, Spanish, English, and Ute languages. So you can see here in the pictures, there are 4 exhibit pieces that go along with it. The first over here on the left, this is our story wall. It's the biggest piece, the piece that welcomes everybody. It has multiple ways for patrons to engage. There are different writing prompts that patrons can write down their thoughts. There are drawing prompts that younger kids can engage with. There's also touch screen technology where visitors can actually listen to the spoken stories of people within the community. Next, there's this giant Connect 4, which is great for the younger generation. We really want this to be a multi-generational exhibit. And this one's all about the non-human elements in the Four Corners region. So it has 4 different tokens featuring landmarks, weather phenomenon, plants, and animals from the Four Corners region. And it's a little bit of a play exploration about how all of these elements work together to create this amazing ecosystem. Next, we have this Plinko piece, and this is all about water use. All the different groups of people using water, how they're using water, and how you share water to everybody in the community when there's not a lot to go around. So in this, visitors can act as a kind of like a water manager and make some decisions about allocating water and how to do that equitably, because it is very clear, and that's what World Water Day is all about, that water access is not equitable to all communities across the whole globe. But this one focuses specifically on the Four Corners region. And the last piece over here is an AR sandbox. So it's using augmented reality. Patrons can create their own landforms and mountains and valleys, and then hold their hand underneath the projector, and then it will rain down light that is water, symbolizes water, and it will fill into the different watersheds. So you really learn about how watersheds are formed, and how one watershed can serve many different communities. And so another way that we're all connected. Now, World Water Day, if you haven't heard of it, that's okay. This is an international event that was started by the United Nations in 1993. It is celebrated every year on March 22nd, and it celebrates water and raises awareness of the 2 billion people in the world who don't have access to safe water. This was developed to inspire action towards the UN's Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is water and sanitation for all by 2030. So we're hoping we can give you some ideas throughout this webinar, some resources, some activities that you can do that week of March 22nd to help be a part of World Water Day and help raise awareness about what the UN is doing to try to give water and sanitation for all by 2030. So the theme for 2023 for World Water Day is accelerating change through partnerships and cooperation. Last year, the theme was groundwater, which was really cool. They had resources all about like what groundwater is, how it affects the hydrological system, how humans are impacted by groundwater, and how we impact groundwater itself too, in the quality of it. So if you go to the website, www.worldwaterday.org, it still has last year's theme, so you can kind of check out the different resources that they developed for it. And within the next few months, that will shift to 2023 theme, which is accelerating change. But at that website, there are opportunities to learn about the topic. So they'll have all kinds of informational printouts in multiple languages that you can just have at your library. You can pass out during programs. There's also ways to share the campaign. So they have merchandise that you can purchase. They have social media posts that you can just put right into your social media, and all kinds of ways just to get the word out about what World Water Day is and what the UN is trying to do. And finally, it has different ways you can get involved. I know last year with groundwater, they were inviting people to record their own stories, similar to what we're doing with the We Are Water project, but just starting conversations, doing what we did in the chat earlier with that icebreaker, but sharing concerns, challenges, and opportunities and joys around water in your community. All right, so we have 3 activities we're going to be demonstrating for you. We hope maybe some of them can be useful and you can put them in your planning for March if you want to celebrate World Water Day. So I'm going to turn it over to Dylan for the first activity called Drop in the Bucket.
Thanks, Claire. So drop in the bucket is a fantastic kind of demo, icebreaker kind of activity. It actually combines really well with another activity called Catch the World's Oceans. That's why there's an inflatable globe on here. But all the supplies you need for a drop in the bucket is a 5-gallon bucket, a clear container for putting your removed water, an eyedropper, and a measuring cup. And what this activity is all about is using a really simple visual metaphor of filling a 5-gallon bucket with water and removing the relative amount of different sources of water on Earth using the 5-gallon bucket as a model. So can we get the next slide, Clay? So I'm gonna throw this out there. Why don't we go ahead and I'm gonna do a quick informal question to y'all attending the webinar. So how much of the water of the Earth do you think is covered in water? Go ahead and throw an answer in the chat. The whole surface, like how much of the surface of the Earth do you think is covered in water? Christy's guessing 70%, Heidi 70%. I am guessing that a few of you might know the answer. Lindsay's guessing 90%. What are some different sources of water? Why don't you go ahead and throw that in the chat as well? Of all this 70%, I'm going to say 70% is about right. It is about 71%. But where do you think that 71% is coming from? What kind of sources of water are there on Earth? Are you saying oceans? Absolutely. Oceans is a big one. Oceans is probably absolutely the majority of the water on Earth. Can anybody think of any other water sources? Rivers, lakes, glaciers, bodies of water, absolutely. Rivers, that's great. Can we get the next slide, Claire? So yeah, you're all absolutely right. About 71% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, and that comes from sources like oceans, groundwater. Christy's asking, does rain count? And I would say rain is part of the atmosphere, atmospheric events. So rain absolutely counts. That atmospheric water cycle is definitely part of the sources of water on Earth. So you have the ice caps and glaciers, the atmosphere, saltwater and freshwater lakes, and rivers. Now, how much of that water do you think is usable by humans as a fresh water source? Of all that 71% of water on Earth, 71% of the Earth is water. How much of that do you think, what percentage of that do you think is usable fresh water? Tina's guessing 1 to 2%. Anybody else got a guess? 30%, 10%? So it's interesting, and can we go to the next slide, Claire? Only about 3.5% of the Earth, the water on Earth, is fresh water. And because most of that is trapped in ice and glaciers, only about 0.00003% is usable by humans. So we're talking about minuscule amounts that humanity has fresh water on Earth that humans have access to. So I'm going to, now that we've covered some of that background science, I'm going to go ahead and shift over to my demo station. Claire, if you would go mind pinning my camera view. All right. So here we have the drop in a bucket setup. We've got all the supplies we need. We've got this 5-gallon bucket that I filled up with some water from my faucet. We have a clear container. I'm using just this drinking glass to represent the water we're going to talk about. I have an eyedropper. This one happens to have, this is a medicine eyedropper. I think that's really useful for this activity, as you're going to be measuring out both individual drops of water as well as some teaspoons in here. If you guys want to follow along, Beatrice, if you want to throw that link bank in the chat one more time, this is the drop in the bucket activity. You can, on the STEM activity clearinghouse, you can go ahead and pull up that PDF and follow along if you'd like. And then the last thing we have is the measuring cup here. So this 5-gallon bucket is going to be representing all of the water on Earth, and we're going to be pulling out some of those sources. So if we want to pull out the amount for waters, that is only about 0.00001% of the total water on Earth, and that is just going to be represented by like a single flick of water into our glass. Next, let's pull out the atmospheric water, the rain that we were talking about in the chat just now, and that's only about 0.001%, and so that's going to be a single drop we're going to pull out. and put into our cup. All right, so now let's think about inland seas and salt lakes. That's the total percentage of water on Earth is about 0.008%, and that's going to be about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So we're going to pull that out. There we go. It's going to be about halfway up to that 1/4 teaspoon. We're going to put that into our cup. So we've now pulled out 3 different sources of fresh water from all of the world's water. And this is kind of representing some of those human accessible inland, the atmospheric rain that we can collect from rainwater, as well as the rivers and lakes. Now we're going to pull out the freshwater lakes, and that's 0.009%. That's also about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So that's about the same amount of water in the inland seas and and salt lakes as there are in freshwater lakes. Now let's pull out the groundwater. That's going to be about 1/4 cup. So what's interesting about groundwater, or sorry, about 1/3 of a cup. So what's interesting about groundwater is even as we tap it, that does not replenish nearly as quickly as rivers and waters, rainwater, anything like that. So once we use that, as has been happening in California and other drought-ridden agricultural sites, some of that, as we tap into that groundwater takes thousands and thousands of years to build up, and that's not an easily replenishable source. So groundwater is an important freshwater source for us to be cognizant of. Now we'll pull out the ice caps and glaciers. That's about 2% of the total water on Earth, so that's about 1 cup. And the rest of the water on Earth is all oceans. So here's the human accessible water on Earth, and here are all of the oceans. Out of all the water on Earth, if this bucket represents all the water on Earth, this is the entirety of the Earth, of the water that is accessible by humans. So I think that's a really good, powerful visual metaphor for introducing just how much little water we're talking about in terms of what humans have access to, what they're dependent on for agriculture, drinking water, hygiene, all of that for all of humanity is this compared to this. So I think that's a great icebreaker kind of demo activity as you're thinking about ways to discuss water conservation and programming with your patrons. This is a fantastic kind of visual metaphor, I think, that has some really, really strong power for demonstrating those kind of ideas. So that was the drop in the bucket activity. There are plenty of discussion questions included in the facilitation guide that's available on the STEM Activity Clearinghouse, as well as the STEM Activity Clearinghouse page also has custom library-focused modification and preparation lists that we have prepared for you that show give you advice on how to run this as a virtual program. Those of you who might still be affected by heavy COVID-19 rates and are doing virtual programming, there's step-by-step guides on how to set this up as a demo on a virtual program, as well as how to do this for in-person programming as well. So that's a drop in the bucket. I'm going to turn this back over to Claire to talk a little bit about our Waffle Garden activity.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, I think just having that visual representation can be really helpful, especially for younger patrons like upper elementary school to tweens who might, they're working on their percentages and their math, and but even so, having a visual representation can really help them understand those numbers. So now I have another demo before we get into our Waffle Garden activity that's very similar to what Dylan just showed us with the drop in the bucket. This is a video that you can just show patrons at a program. And this is focusing specifically on the Southwest of the United States. So I'm going to share my screen again and show this 5-minute video about who's really using up the water in the American West. So it might be a little choppy since I'm screen sharing, but the link to this video is in that link bank if you want to check it out.
This represents all the water used in 1 year in the Western United States. For the past 20+ years, a mega drought, made worse by man-made global warming, has left the West drier than it's been in over 1,000 years. That includes the Colorado River system, where reservoirs have been depleted to record lows. which has people talking about ways to cut back.
Cities are taking aim at the backyard swimming pool.
Restrictions such as not washing cars at home and no power washing houses.
Businesses and residents must cut their outdoor watering to just 1 day a week.
But this is all the residential water use for 115 million people across 17 western states. All the lawn watering and toothbrushing and pools and showers use only 6% of all water consumption. The rest of this tells a totally different story. A team of researchers came up with these water use estimates, and they found that another 8% goes towards commercial and industrial uses, like offices, hotel fountains, mines, and power plants. Together with residential use, that's 14% of all water consumption in the West. All of what's left in here, the other 86%, is for growing crops.
Irrigated agriculture is the big story. All the other water users added together don't come close to irrigated agriculture.
In the dry western states, farms can't count on rain, so crops need irrigation. So here's soybeans, nuts, wheat, fruits and veggies, corn. But what's even more surprising is that the biggest share of this water goes to crops humans don't eat. The biggest water guzzler is alfalfa. You might not recognize this plant, but if you've ever seen a bale of hay that looks greenish, that's alfalfa. Unlike a lot of crops, with enough water, farmers in the West can harvest it up to 12 times a year and sell every last bit.
It's about a 9 to 10 month crop down in our part of the desert. And so you're farming it 9 or 10 months, and therefore you're irrigating it during that time.
We can group alfalfa's water with the water used for other grass hays and for corn silage. Together, this accounts for 32% of the West's entire water footprint. And what they have in common is that these are all crops grown almost exclusively to feed cows. That's more than all the residential and commercial uses combined, a third of all the water consumed in the West just for feeding cattle. Americans eat nearly 4 times more beef than the global average. Our dairy intake has been increasing for decades too, and we're not alone. At least 10% of this cattle feed ends up on container ships crossing the Pacific to feed cows in Japan, China, and the Middle East.
Agriculture in the United States is built to supply a world export market.
So what do we do about this? It's clear that letting our lawns die would make less of an impact than changing our diets. But that solution is a hard sell for consumers, even the most informed ones.
In case anybody takes me for like a meat-hating like college professor, cheeseburgers are my favorite food, and my cheeseburgers come from Colorado River water. So I have thought about it, and I think that before we all stop eating meat, we should explore a couple of other solutions.
Ben and his co-authors highlight an approach called rotational fallowing. It enables agencies representing metropolitan water users to set a price that they'll pay farmers to temporarily stop irrigating a portion of their fields. Farmers decide whether it's worth it in any given year to take that deal, and the unused water can then be sent to the cities or left in reservoirs.
Can fallowing hay and alfalfa in the Colorado River Basin solve the current 2022 year drought crisis? The answer is yes.
There's a long-term agreement like this in place between the water district that serves LA and San Diego and the Palo Verde Irrigation District in rural California. The deal allows up to 29% of the total farmland to be fallowed.
It's been largely well received in our valley. I think farmers like it.
Bart Fisher's farm depends entirely on water from the Colorado River, so he supports the conservation program. But he also says it doesn't work for everyone.
You know, whenever you do fallowing, there are economic losers and economic winners. And some of our vendors who may sell seed or fertilizer, they're a loser.
Jobs, communities, and global supply chains currently rely on Western farmers growing vast amounts of cow food in the middle of the desert. But as water supplies continue to shrink, Something has to give in how we eat, what we grow, and where we grow it.
You know, when you look at the water use on the river, the short-term savings has to come out of agriculture. There's no other place to get it.
All right, so that is just a short video that kind of highlights what water is being used for in the West and who is using it. Of course, this is a complicated topic with no easy solutions. And that's one of the topics that is being brought up with the We Are Water project. If you remember that Clearinghouse exhibit piece, that's kind of at the heart of what that piece is getting at. And it doesn't have any answers. It doesn't tell visitors what is right or wrong, because everyone has their own values. But it does start getting visitors and kids, really thinking about these issues and trying to come up with solutions. But one of the activity that we've created for the We Are Water project is called Waffle Garden Kits. So people have been growing food and growing crops in the American Southwest for millennia. And waffle gardens is an indigenous technique that is still being used by the Dene, the Zuni, Zia Pueblo, and the Laguna Pueblo, and many indigenous cultures down in the American Southwest. So the waffle garden kit that we created, we actually developed with a member of the Laguna Pueblo, who is a waffle garden farmer, has been his whole life. He also uses some ditch irrigation, but essentially waffle gardening is a way to grow crops by really conserving water and really being smart and careful about how you're engineering your garden plots. So I'm going to share my screen again and we can talk about waffle gardening or dry farming in the American Southwest. All right. So as I was mentioning before, this is a centuries-old technique. It integrates the cycles of the seasons and geological knowledge of the area to really secure an optimal location and method for growing crops. And this has been utilized. This is a time-tested method that really works, and it is still being used today very successfully and will be used for a long time in the future. Here is a picture of what a waffle garden looks like. This is courtesy of the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. So we have taken the concepts of waffle gardening and put it into an educational kit that you can send out as a take and make kit to your visitors, so that it can learn a little bit about how this method works and do a little bit of inquiry-based data collection, so that they can really see for themselves how effective waffle gardening is in growing food when you don't have a lot of rainfall. So the kit materials come with 2 rectangular containers for planting, seeds, craft sticks for a low-tech way of collecting data sheets, an activity instruction, and soil. So for those who are participating in the We Are Water project, you will be receiving these kits fully made, and I'll show you what that looks like. For those who would like to create them yourselves, all of the instructions are located in the link bank, so you can see what all the materials are and put together your own kits to give out to your visitors. This also can be, you can really take it for like as big or as small as you want. I know some librarians have started actually creating their own waffle gardens in their community gardens instead of a take and make type of material. But if you want to turn this into a found object where you are recycling planters or using soil from your garden, there's all kinds of ways that you can customize this for your community. All right, and I'm going to show you what our waffle garden kits look like. So I'll stop sharing here. Go ahead and spotlight myself. All right. So We Are Water host libraries, you will be receiving kits such as this. It comes with a little label. Everything is in English and Spanish for this activity. If you're not a We Are Water host library, all of the materials you can find on the STEM Activity Clearinghouse. But it's a pretty simple kit. It comes with a bag of soil that has enough soil to fill 2 different containers. Because the purpose of this activity is kids will do 1 container like a waffle garden and 1 container just like a typical field without the waffle garden shapes. And then they'll be able to test and see which one needs to be watered more often. Finally, as I said, it also comes with instructions, a little bit of background information on waffle gardens and the cultural connections, and a data collection sheet as the kids are going through and doing science through gardening. Finally, each kit also comes with a packet of seeds and 4 craft sticks to collect the data. Now, what we've chosen to put in the kits as far as seeds go are just herbs, since these containers are so small. But the activity guide itself does talk about traditional plants and crops that are grown in the American Southwest. But things such as squash, chili plants, and beans, those are much bigger crops. So if you were to do this at your library's community garden, you could do that. But these are meant for more of a windowsill type of garden. So we find that herbs just work a little bit better in terms of the space that they have allowed to grow. All right, I'm going to switch my screen. So you can see I've prepared 2 plots here. So the one over here without the holes, this represents just, your typical garden. You haven't done anything. All you've done is gone and planted seeds in it. And then here we have the waffle garden. So again, it's very simple, but it is brilliant the way that just changing the shape of your garden plot can really aid in water conservation. I find that it really helps to have a spoon to create the little depressions. But it's kind of apt, it's named because it looks just like a waffle that you might eat. And once you've created those little depressions, you're going to plant the seeds at the bottom of each of the waffle holes. And that way, the ground itself is working with you to direct water directly to the plant's roots so that they are getting optimal water. And in order to collect the data, it's very simple. You just take a craft stick, and it's just like testing a cake. If you put the raw cake dough into the oven, you want to pull it out and see if it's ready. You might put a knife in or a toothpick, and that will just give you information if it's ready or not. So if you put the craft stick in and it comes up completely dry, nothing is stuck to it, that means it's time to water. So all the patrons have to do on their data collection sheets is write down their observations of what comes out of their craft stick. And if it's dry, they need to water it. Versus if they stick it in and it comes out with a bunch of little flakes like that, there's wet soil stuck to the craft stick, that means you do not need to water. So you don't need to waste water if you do this little technique. So there it is. It's very simple. Kids are making observations every day or every other day. They're writing them down. And they're really learning about the waffle gardening or dry farming technique that Indigenous communities have been using for so long and are continuing to use today with great success. All right, now we'll switch my camera back over. So that's the waffle garden kit. It's a lot of fun. And then at the end, you have food, whether that's herbs or if you're growing things like corn and squash. You have food that comes out of it, which is always a fun part of any science activity. All right, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dylan for our last activity demonstration.
All right, so y'all are in for a treat with this last one. This is a brand new activity, hot off the presses, just uploaded to the STEM Activity Clearinghouse. Really, really fun one. This is actually an activity we developed for another project, the Solar Eclipse Activities for Libraries project, which Claire is going to be talking about a little bit later in this webinar. But this is an activity, this is actually the extension portion of an activity all about building a pizza box solar oven. So here we have a photo of an example right here. So this uses a pizza box solar oven, which you can construct, and I'll show you an example in just a bit. And we have step-by-step instructions on the activity guide that's also in the webinar link bank that Beatrice has been linking to. But what this activity does is a really good example of how you can use solar energy to purify dirty water using gravity and the power of the sun. So you, can I get the next slide, Claire? So as I said, it's an extension of the pizza oven the pizza box solar oven activity in the new SEAL activity collection. It's a great as a water purification activity, or you can use it as a follow-up to the solar oven. You can do this successionally through a few weeks if you wanted to build the solar ovens one week, use them for baking some items the following week, and then using it as a solar still the following week. It's also, this is a great redirect if you wanted to do the solar oven activity, but there isn't quite enough sun to get hot enough to bake, but you're maybe hot enough to produce a little bit of warmth and some steam, or it's a cloudy day. This is a really good way to kind of salvage that solar oven activity, and also talk about how solar distillation is a really great way to purify water worldwide, and lots of communities all across the world use solar stills to purify contaminated water in their area. So here we have a diagram. We have both a picture of the completed solar oven. What you do is you take a pizza box, you cut open a lid and prop it open with a chopstick or a craft stick. You're going to line that with foil, line the inside of the box with foil, and then create a heat sink using a black piece of paper or some cardstock. And I'll show you a little bit more detail on the demo cam in just a second. But the way that this works is, if you look at the diagram on the right, you have the sun reflecting its sunlight into that propped up lid, which is labeled with the A, and that reflects that light and down into your solar oven, which has in that opening is covered by a plastic wrap. And that retains that heat as that solar oven bounces around in there, inside your solar oven that's reflected from that lid. And as that heat is trapped in there, it's reflected all over that light is reflected all over the inside of the box. And that black paper acts as a heat sink. So it actually converts that light energy into heat energy. So what you can do is place a larger container full of some dirty water. The example I'll show you in just a second, I've just taken a pie tin and filled it with a little bit of water and some potting soil. And then you can put a smaller container inside that dirty water container and put some rocks on top of the plastic wrap so it creates an indentation. And what will happen is the solar oven heats the water, the water evaporates from the larger dirty water container, collects on the plastic wrap, and those rocks create an indentation where all of that now purified evaporated water drips down into the interior container, creating fresh drinkable water. Yeah, let me go ahead and switch over to my demo cam. Ta-da! So here we have the solar oven as constructed. I'll lift it up so you can see. So I've lined the inside of this pizza box with all this foil. That's going to cause that refraction that's going to create and amplify that solar light energy to create some more heat. We have this heat sink right here. And as you can see, this is propped up with some chopstick. I just have some regular old chopsticks left over from some Chinese takeout orders. And then this reflector panel. This reflector panel is really, really an important part of that, as that's what's going to capture that heat and reflect it down into your solar oven. So here we can set up the activity just by, here I've taken this pie tin, like I said, covered it with some potting soil. I'm going to go ahead and place that on the heat sink. Here I have a clear plastic container that's going to collect our purified water. I'm going to go ahead and just place that right there in that dirty water. I'm going to close my solar oven. Making sure I get it as close as possible. See, now we've got that refraction. You can see the setup in there. And then just to make sure the water will still evaporate on its own like this, but if we want it to collect directly into that clean water container, I'm just going to create a groove by placing a couple of these stones I have around. You can use river stones, any kind of fish, if you have some fish weights, just make sure that it's not so heavy that it's pulling the plastic wrap away from the lid of your box. And once again, all of these step-by-step instructions on how to build this solar oven are in our brand new solar oven activity guide. We have step-by-step pictures on how to construct these, as well as recipes for 3 different recipes for a quesadilla, some s'mores, and my favorite, the Nutty for Solar Science cookies, which are vegan nut butter, banana, and chocolate cookies, which are really fantastic. We have an explanation of the solar science and activity guide of how solar energy is captured by NASA, as well as this solar oven extension. So once you've got it set up like this, all you got to do is place this in a place where it's going to receive as much sunlight as possible. On a warm, mostly cloudy day, this would still kind of work. You just want to make sure that you're placing your reflector panel facing the direction of generally where the sun is coming through the clouds. But this is a great activity to do as a demonstration. What you'll do is once you've got this set up outside, after about 10-15 minutes, you'll start to see some condensation collecting on the underside of that the plastic wrap, and that'll all be if you've placed your rocks correctly to create enough of an indentation, all of that will start as that condensation and evaporation collects, dripping right into your clean container, and you'll be able to take that clean container out at about the end of 10-20 minutes, depending on how much sunlight it's receiving, how warm of a day it is, but you'll be able to show that the water inside the the interior container contains no soil. So it's a really, really great demonstration of how distillation, the process of evaporating water to purify it, is a really, really great way to conserve water, to create fresh drinkable water from contaminated or dirty water. And also this is a survival technique, a water conservation technique that's used worldwide by lots of different communities. And that is the solar oven, solar still extension activity.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so I will, since that is one of our new activities from our solar eclipse activities for libraries project, different from the We Are Water project, but it shares some connections. I want to just give a brief shout out to that project and let you know how you can get involved with the upcoming, we have 2 upcoming eclipses. So here we go. October 14th, 2023, there will be an annular solar eclipse. And this is the path of annularity, although it will still be visible in most of the US. And that's where the moon doesn't completely cover the sun. It covers it enough to give this little ring around it. So that is actually what annular means, is a ring. And then April 8th, 2024, there is a total solar eclipse. And this is the path of totality going across the US. And that's when you will have the full total solar eclipse where the moon fully covers the sun, or appears to, and you get these amazing, just amazing visuals around the sun. And during totality, you can actually look directly at the sun just for those few minutes, even without solar eclipse glasses. So this is a new project with funding from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and we are working with them to provide 5 million eclipse glasses to public libraries across the US and in some of the US territories. And this is all free for you. All you have to do is go on the link that's in the link bank for the solar eclipse activity for libraries and sign up on the survey how many glasses you want for your community, and we will send them to you for free. We are also doing in-person training in each state and in 5 US territories. So if you're interested in going to the workshop in your state, just give myself or Dylan an email. Our contact information is on the link bank. We're also providing circulating kits to the state libraries that you can check out from them, which includes solar telescopes. We'll be doing in-person, but also online training. If you can't make it to that in-person training at your state library, just keep involved with us, and we'll let you know when we have online trainings coming up. And then we have an interactive community hosted on the StarNet website. So the StarNet community will provide access to each other. So it's kind of like a Facebook page where you can talk with each other, share ideas, vetted hands-on activities such as the one that Dylan just showed you. And those are housed on our STEM activity clearinghouse. And we're also working with subject matter experts to get scientists, volunteers, Eclipse subject matter experts to your library. So all kinds of great stuff with this project. I know it's not quite We Are Water, but there's a lot of overlap. So definitely check that out if you are interested in getting Eclipse classes and you want to engage your visitors in solar science. All right, so that was my one plug for our new project. But we'll end with a little discussion because I know you all are doing so much and you know your communities the best. So we would love to hear from you. What are some things that you have done to promote water conservation in your library with your communities? So this could be activities, events, resources, because we're always trying to build up our repertoire as well. So feel free to share in the chat. What has your library done to promote water conservation?
And if this is a process you're just getting started, what are some ways you would be interested in promoting water conservation? What are some topics you might be interested in covering at your library? Don't feel like you have to have been a water warrior already. What are some ways you can foresee yourself promoting water conservation at your organization?
Right, Heidi says maybe something about cleaning our rivers. Yeah, that would be great. I did a alternative spring break trip my senior year of college, and we floated down the San Juan River. It was 7 days on the river, and we were just pulling out trash. And I can't tell you how many tires we pulled out of the river, but I think that could be a really engaging thing to get your community involved with. Lindsay shares converting our toilets to gray water. I love that. And Lindsay, I didn't mention this, but this year in conjunction with World Water Day, there's also a new initiative called World Toilet Day, which is all about that type of stuff and conserving water through toilets. So if you go to the World Water Day website, you can learn more about World Toilet Day. Tina says, our landscapers are planting water-wise plants. We collaborate with the local botanic gardens with programs and with the local Indigenous Museum with their ethnobotany garden. The teens just completed a river health citizen science project this summer. Awesome, Tina. That is excellent.
Y'all are doing some cool stuff around water conservation.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing that, and feel free to add more if you have other ideas. But we really hope that this webinar has given you a few ideas, even if you're getting ideas from each other, but ways that you can help raise awareness about World Water Day, engage in conversations with your community about water issues facing your community. Whether or not you're from the Four Corners region, every single community is impacted by water. So we'll stick around for just a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions or would like additional resources, but otherwise, thank you so much for joining. And the recording to this webinar will be located on the StarNet website. The link is in the link bank if you want to share this with any of your programming staff or any other libraries that might be interested in getting involved with World Water Day.
And thanks y'all so much for attending, for sharing your cool ideas and stories during our icebreaker, as well as sharing some of the the cool ways y'all have been involved with water conservation. It's always great to know that we're working with such fantastic library staff and librarians such as yourselves, attending these kind of programs, being active in this kind of work. It really makes our jobs better. And so we want to thank you for attending and participating in such a cool webinar. I can tell you a horror story about digging a well in our area when building a house. I don't think anybody's had a non-horror story about digging a well on their property, right? Like, I don't think that's usually something like, yeah, I dug a well on my property and everything came out fine.
Well, Lindsay, I definitely want to hear that story. We'll be working with you soon. Oh no. Yep.
Oh
That's
no.
a lot of money. She says $14,000 for an empty hole. Yeah. Well,
that's like one semester of community college.
yeah. Well, I will be sure to get more details from you about that later. Oh.
No, I'm writing this down. Note to self: do not think it's a good idea to dig a well. It actually reminds me, my husband was recently sharing with me stories of amateur tunnelers. Apparently this is like a big community of mostly dudes who just dig tunnels for no reason on their property. And like, apparently it's a big thing. And they're like a whole bunch of people whose like wives and girlfriends discovered after he died that he had dug a tunnel complex like in their backyard. So you could have spent $14,000 on just building a pointless tunnel, Lindsay. Instead, you were at least attempting to build a well. That's right. We all gotta have a hobby. And I feel like I'm one bad day away from becoming an amateur tunneler myself. I like the idea of building my own escape route.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We love working with you. Reach out if you have any questions and have a great rest of your day.
Fantastic doing this webinar with all y'all. Have a fantastic rest of your day.